And welcome to 2025's very last chance to kill me.
I am up early enough to catch the sunrise this morning, which is very unusual for me. Matt's been up at this time every day. The reason that we got up a little bit earlier today is because we have a chance to see the red snapper spawning event.
One of the things Palau seems to be known for is spawning events. For example, I had actually seen an episode of Blue World years ago about a bumphead parrotfish spawning they witnessed. While we wouldn't be there for the bumpheads, there are apparently multiple types of spawning events. And last night at dinner, the guides had told us we would be getting up early to see the red snapper spawning at a dive site called Shark City. The spawning happens on the moon cycle, and if you're wondering why it happens so early in the morning, it's apparently an evolved response to give the fertilized eggs a better chance at survival. It basically happens in the period after the nighttime fish go to sleep, but before the daytime fish are fully active. That, combined with the fact it's generally an outgoing tide, means more of the eggs make it away from the reef, where there's a lot of life and a lot of predation, and get dispersed into the far emptier deep waters where they have a better chance at survival. Unfortunately, since the spawning happens on a regular schedule, there were a lot of other boats out here for the exact same reason.
Is a lifeboat entry, get ready, back roll, drop down, spawning, or underwater 4.
Similar to Blue Corner, Shark City is a protrusion out into the ocean at the end of the island, meaning there's a better chance of seeing something cool coming in from the deep ocean. The spawning events specifically have a decent chance of pulling in oceanic blacktip sharks or bull sharks, which will feed on the exhausted adults. We dropped in with groups everywhere. Even in the darkish early morning conditions, we could see them in most other directions by their bubbles, if not by their lights. Despite telling us to be ready to swim, the guides ended up setting us up on some sand down at about 80 feet to conserve air while they looked around and tried to figure out where the groups of fish were. They ended up finding something and motioned us to follow. We followed out to the edge of this plateau and waited along with a few other groups, but while there were red snapper there, they were spread out and nothing really happened. So after a few minutes, we left those groups and swam over to the opposite side. Ironically, while I was lagging behind the group to conserve as much air as I could, I actually managed to see a small group of about 30 snapper that came in and maybe 30-40 feet from me did the classic rising up to the surface egg and sperm release. But sadly, Jen had the camera at the time and was up ahead. When I caught back up, we'd finally found a huge mass of red snapper, and one of the other guests did get this footage of them doing their release. However, Jen was too blown away by the big mass of fish, so she kept filming the ones that weren't getting it on. Anybody want to invest in Blondie's new porn venture? Instead of focusing on the action, the camera just stays glued to the extras all the time. The plan had been to stay back and observe, and we should have been able to see a number of the rise and release actions happen. Unfortunately, at this point, other groups came in, and divers out of control of the guides made straight for the fish, scaring them off into the deep. So instead, we just got to see a big freeway of fish making their way off in the distance. The guides seemed frustrated by this, and one did make a comment about Chinese dive operations. While that was a bummer, at least it was still cool to get to see that many fish moving off together like that. It reminded me kind of like visiting the bat colonies when I was a kid growing up in Texas. They'd all do that same kind of windy tubular shape going in and out of all the terrain. Sadly, after that, the dive was basically over since we'd been down so deep. Surfacing was also kind of tricky since there were that many active boats coming and going, and they didn't know if all the captains were paying attention, so we were very, very gradual as we came up.
And then there's a corner. Sometimes there's lots of sharks on the corner. Very sharks swimming around, and schools of barracuda. Hurry!
This dive was back in the same area as Ulong Channel, which was a dive that we did on our second day of diving. This time the plan was to drop down, follow the wall to the corner where the channel started, hang out and watch the show, and then finish with a drift back along the channel. Jen and I were actually pretty far apart for a good portion of this dive, at least in the beginning. I was hanging out on the reef watching all the little fish, while Jen was off playing around in the blue with other little fish. We had some sharks that kept coming by, checking us out, and then heading back to the channel mouth. They looked noticeably more chubby than most of the reef sharks we've been seeing, and we were both wondering if they were a different type. When we asked the guide after the dive, he said that they were actually the same type, but pregnant. The plan was to head straight for the corner, but we ended up getting kind of distracted by this cool little bait ball. It wasn't nearly as massive as the red snappers from this morning, but the lighting was better and it kept changing between a tornado and this cool figure 8 type shape. We were all highly entertained by the bait ball, but eventually we had to push on for the corner. Unfortunately, the current wasn't that strong this dive, and as a result, there wasn't quite as much going on at the hook spot. We had some sharks, but they mostly stayed further off, though we did have this eagle ray come by. After that, we did get to drift a little while down the channel. Jen and I had both really enjoyed this part when we dove here a few days ago, and we're kind of disappointed we spent so little time on it. But per the main guide, it was because we all spent too much of our bottom time playing with the bait ball, so fair enough.
That is my new favorite dive of this trip because we were in big schools of fish the whole entire time.
She liked it so much she almost left our group for others like at least 2 or 3 times. It's like, why is Jen going with those people?
I didn't cause too much of a problem, did I? I came back as soon as you got my attention.
10 minutes later after joining the other group.
You were up on the reef signaling me there was clownfish, and I was like, oh, I want to go see the pretty reef. I want to go see the clownfish, but I love also so much being down here
to find them for
in the
her,
blue
and
with the
she's
fish
like,
and the sharks.
I'm looking over
It's a
here.
good problem to have. Do I go to the beautiful reef? Do I hang with the sharks? Oh, paradise.
Paradise with a cucumber molester. And we actually have a longer break since we had an early start this morning, so we are waiting until 1-ish. I think it's because we have to transition back to German channel. If you're wondering why the color is off on this one, I was experimenting with GoPro settings I'd found online. I didn't care for how much bluer everything was, and so I went back to auto white balance on the next dive. This was the second of 3 times we dove German Channel on this trip. Again, it's primarily known as a manta cleaning station, and while mantas are really cool, we are a little less impressed with the cleaning station dives after having done Socorro, where the mantas actually come up and interact with you. Having said that, this was probably the best of the 3 dives we did here. We didn't have anybody kicking coral or chasing mantas, so we were at least above that low bar. The biggest issue was the guy didn't communicate real well where the actual cleaning station was and kept gesturing wildly to have us all reposition, which caused quite a bit of confusion. But again, better than last time. At least in the end, we were positioned a lot better and had a number of close passes. The guide did take us out to check out the deep stations again, but again, we didn't see anything much beyond a few sharks, well, and this tech diver that was hanging around with his massive camera. Plus, you know, the higher food content of the water raises it a degree or
I see one. I see one.
Working on new hairstyles here.
Colorful Ludi. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, and 3.
At this point, both us and our friends with the yellowfins and mohawk were giving up on the walls pretty quickly and just shallowing up to enjoy all the fish activity. Unfortunately, that didn't really work here at first, as the shallows were really, really shallow. So we made do, tried not to think about how much less there was to see versus your average Raja wall, and eventually went up to the top when the wall dropped a bit. Just as we were about to surface, I noticed this little jellyfish swimming around near us, and Jen and I went back down to look at it. They are just fascinating to watch, and there's such a variety between the various species out there. Getting stung by one is actually a concern, and I do my best to stay aware of my surroundings even when I'm doiking around with the camera, to varying degrees of success. And we just got the rallying call for the night dive, which will hopefully be a little more eventful than yesterday's.
Yes.
Goes down to very deep. Again, so we do the maximum of 50 feet. Light in the trails. Otherwise they get blind and they hit you. Okay?
This was basically just the same dive as Big Drop Off, just a little further along the wall. Though both Jen and I did find this one prettier than the last dive, considering the lights really made the vivid corals pop against the black background. We also had turtles everywhere, though it was a little sad that they were sleeping and would swim away off into the dark when our group got close. Partway through the dive, the currents changed. We felt the temperature swing and we started moving faster and faster along the wall, which is, needless to say, an interesting sensation in the dark. It got to the point where I signaled Jen to come in tight with the rest of the group because I wasn't sure we weren't about to get into something interesting. Fortunately, it capped out soon after and we were able to enjoy the rest of our dive.
Happy birthday to you.
And that was it for what had honestly been a rather brutal 2025. Well, kind of. Technically, it wouldn't be New Year's back home until one of the dives tomorrow, which was one of the dives where things went kind of bad. But hey, first we were going to get to be the first people to penetrate virgin holes in the new year. And here we have 4 hooks for 2 people. They are color-coded, they're name-labeled, and yet there are blondie bikinis on 3 out of the 4. One would think, well, I used 2 hooks, she used 2 hooks. No, fails. Biggest news of the dive. She can't use hooks. They're color-coded, they have names. Anyway.
We can share the hooks. I just use my
Share, she means she uses 3. I get 1 sometimes.
Anyway.